shitty shoulds are between you and the life that you are dreaming of living. I'm Morgan Motzinger, and I'm the host of the PS We Expire podcast. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. Today, you get to hear my conversation with Julia Gentry. Julia is a national speaker and author, a business owner, growth coach, wife, homeschool mom to 5 kids, and she has a big message about what it is like to live your dream life. What is it like to take your big dreams and actually turn them into actionable steps to move in the direction of the life that you know that you are meant to live? So thank you for joining me for this episode. I am so glad that you're here. Julia, I am so excited to talk with you today about your company, about the work that you're doing, and most importantly, about the big message that you want to bring to the people that you speak to and the people that you interact with, not only in your online community, but in your offline community. So can you talk to me a little bit about why mindset is such a hugely important conversation for you to have?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what's interesting is that we look at our world, I think we are very prone to behavior modification. Right? Like we've grown up in the information age for most of us, right? Like if you're mid 30s into 40s, like we have grown up in information age, which means anything that we want to know, we can find at the click of a button, right? Almost to the point, even the other day, Morgan, my son, who's 9, he listens to this preacher every night as he falls asleep, but he comes downstairs the next morning and he goes, "Mom, did you know that red meat is bad for you?"
Oh no.
I eat a ton of red meat. Like I happen to love it. So I was like, what are you talking about? And he legitimately gives me like 5 like locked and loaded facts on why red meat is bad for you. And I looked up at him, right? Premise for all those who are listening. I homeschool my kids. So I'm like, where the heck did he get this information from? Right. He goes, what was on YouTube last night? And I looked at him and I go, buddy, did you know that everything that you listen to on YouTube or you Google is not true? And he looked at me like, does that mean Santa Claus isn't real? Does that mean that the Easter Bunny is not real too? Like, I say that because I feel like right now we're in this time where we as people could Google anything to change a behavior, right? How to make more money, how to lose more weight, how to anything. And you and I would find pages and pages and pages of answers on how to fix any problem we have. And yet, statistically speaking, we have more people who are suicidal. We have more depression. We have more divorce. Like the rate of anxiety, all of these things are increasing at exponential numbers, which tells us there's a gap between information and transformation, right? And so what I have found in my own journey, personally in my own life, and then the thousands of people that I've gotten to coach and interact with, is that we actually don't need behavior modification. We need a mindset modification, because our mindset, our thought patterns drive everything, right? Like that's where it all starts. And so I think that we're just really heading into a time where the future of our world is going to be built on the people with the strongest mindsets, right? The people who believe the most. And that could be good or bad, but I think it's just a topic that we need to be having because mindset impacts everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right that many people are very unaware of that like hierarchy of how behavior actually happens. And you're completely right and accurate about that. There is this information overload that, for the first time in human history, we have access to more information, more tips, more teachers, more gurus than ever before in human history. We have access to so many people's opinions and also so many people's experiments and processes and findings that it is so difficult to sift through all of those things to find what is most useful to us to make the changes in our life that we want to. And I think that the other piece of that is that when we get overwhelmed with the amount of information, it sends us into a state of paralysis. Like, I cannot figure out what the first next step is, or okay, now I see 10 things in my life that I want to change and I want to improve. I don't even know where to start. So I'm just going to continue to numb out to my life because it's all too overwhelming. The information is too overwhelming. And the things in my life that are, quote unquote, broken or not the way that I want it to be or not ideal is too much. So how do you help people move from a state of overwhelm and so much information into getting really clear and quiet in their own minds about what is important to them and how to make positive change in their life?
Yeah, that's so good. And, I think some of it goes to, some people go, well, what's your title? Are you a life coach?
Hmm.
I'm not a life coach. I don't believe in life coach. I'm like, if you're a life coach and you know how to do my life, then I need to be paying you way more money than I'm paying you to teach me how to do my life. So for me, I really fell into this, and the title that most people call me is a growth coach. And
Hmm.
honestly, I think it's just because I'm fascinated by growth. I'm in my own journey. And when I watch other people, I'm fascinated by the gaps, the gap between here's where I am and here's where I want to be. The
Mm-hmm.
gap between this is my dream and this is my reality. Like that gap is super fascinating to me. And at some level, like there's a lot of patterns in between those gaps. And so when I decided to shift into this kind of understanding, it's ultimately what resulted in me writing this book, because what my book does and the way that I approach this is I don't want to give you the answer, right? That's why I also think that motivational and accountability and coaching can be really dangerous, is because what I'm doing is I'm actually outsourcing the thing that God gave me. And that's gut, intuition, his voice, right? And if I hire a coach or a trainer to tell me what to do, then guess who loses the ability to know what to do? Me.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not suggesting that a trainer who's sitting there going, hey, you're doing that push-up the wrong way, like that's helpful, right? Like I need to know if I'm doing quote unquote push-ups in my life the wrong way. But if I need that person to be at the gym to make sure I'm at the gym, right? Or that business coach to make sure that I'm making my phone calls, then what I'm doing is I'm actually outsourcing the fire, the voice, the thing that's on the inside of me that helps me navigate that. And so we're asking the world around us now to give us something that is already ours. And so we're sharpening the noises around us and we're losing the sound within us. We're losing the fire, the burn, the conviction. And so, my approach is less around the semantics of the 1, 2, 3 step guide and more around the introduction to the conversation that's going on within you, both good and bad, right? One that's going to take you away from your dreams and one that's going to move you towards it. Because if you really know what that conversation is, you get back in tune with what that's going to sound like. Then in theory, when I go to hire a trainer, right, like I get the benefit of the guide, because I still have my voice, so I can layer the skill set on top of a healthy mindset and heart set, if you will.
What I like about that, Julia, is that in saying that it is not healthy for us to outsource these types of decisions that should be internally directed, I think it's also very helpful what you said, that sometimes in the beginning, we need people to be able to show us the direction. However, we should be very wary of people that are creating relationships of complete dependence. So if my goal as, I'm not a therapist, but let's say a therapist, their goal is to not continue to make you dependent on them to be able to work through these things in your life, but to give you the tools for you to be able to navigate that yourself going forward. And that at some point you're going to outgrow that relationship and need something different going forward. We don't want to create relationships of total dependence where you don't listen to that internal guidance. And sometimes I think that people can be very wary of just starting to do things like that because they are concerned about outsourcing that or becoming dependent. And so like the kind of like flexibility here has to be that sometimes you have to try things to find out that it's not a good fit for you.
Yeah.
But
well,
again, it goes back to that internal compass and being aware of how your internal response is to whatever that, relationship or mentorship or whatever it looks like.
Totally. Well, and I think, Tony Robbins says the quality of our questions determine the quality of our answers, right? Or another way to say that is whatever I'm looking for, I'm going to find. So that's confirmation bias. And so I think for me, even in what I do, whether it's my kids, my husband, or right, a client, it's not about me having the answer. It's about me supplying a question that gives someone their answer. And you're right. It's not about right or wrong. It's about my starting point, right? So if I ask you a question around how do you think about money? How do you think about sex? How do you think about marriage? What do you think about God? Your answer isn't right or wrong. It's just your starting point, right? And sometimes those starting points, right, we start to go, well, that's wrong. Like, what if I say I'm scared of failure, or my sex life sucks, or, I'm always going to be alone, or it's hard to make money, or any of these things. Again, the only part that gets problematic is my interpretation around that, right? Because in my mind, it is your starting point. It is, right? It is your starting point. It tells us where we're at and the next step of our journey. And if I don't know that I am at a place that says, I don't trust God, or money feels scarce, or my past feels like it's more, impactful than maybe my future, well, then I actually don't know what I'm up against, right? So I can't, I can tackle all the things around me, right? I can try to make the room around me better. I can try to hire a better guru. I can move across the country. Like, I can change the behavior around me. But if I don't know the starting point within me, then I actually don't know the next steps to take, because I don't actually know what I'm up against, right? And so I think if we can simply go, hey, this means my thought prop means nothing about me. Like, I have thoughts, I'm not my thoughts. I have these narratives, doesn't mean I am my narratives. And so if I can actually put pen to paper to go, oh, so maybe it's not the economy that's keeping me from money. Maybe it's the fact that I think that money is just scarce and I won't have it. Maybe maybe I should go after that first, right? And then I think from there we start to go, okay, well, what do I have to unlearn here so I can reposition myself to walk in abundance, to understand how money works, to understand how relationships work, right? To see God maybe from a different perspective. And so what it does is it opens up these cans of worms, right? It starts to create a little bit of a breaking effect, right? Where now all of a sudden things are changing, and oh my gosh, now I can't lean into the consistency of my thought processes. And so this is what makes it all hard, right? But as I say in my book, pick your heart, because it's all hard. It's all going to be hard.
I heard the other day someone gave the metaphor of, I think it was Brene Brown talked about when she works with clients and they say, I don't want to open Pandora's box. And she says, well, you're in Pandora's box. And so to your point of like, these things are already happening. It just, the linchpin, or like the hinge point, is whether or not we're aware of it, whether or not we're willing to ask the questions of, why are these happening? Why do I continue to perpetuate these behaviors? Like, what am I thinking about that is giving me these results that I don't really love? And what I'm also fascinated by is why, what is it? What is the impetus that gets people to the point where they start to ask those questions?
Two things always. We're motivated by pain or pleasure. Like, either the pain is great enough. Malcolm X even says this: I won't hate it. I won't change it if I don't hate it. And so I either have to hate it. I have to hate it so much that I am willing to make a change no matter how hard that change is, or I have to be so motivated by potential, like possibility, right? And so I think that having both of those, I mean, that's why I do the work that I do, because if you have both of those, right? If you can get to a place of pain and going, I hate this so much, and I'm so connected to a greater reason, a greater burn, a greater possibility here, now you can do some damage, is because now you're motivated by both things that stimulate all of us to change. And I just think that that's powerful, right? Because again, if I'm just motivated by pain, a lot of times that'll get me up out of bed in the morning, right? Like, a lot of us we had hard upbringings, right? Or parents that weren't around, or financially we weren't stable. And so some of us, out of spite and fear, can get out of bed in the morning and grind it out all day long. But generally, my reasons for doing things in pain won't keep me going all day long, right? I burn out. I get controlling. I turn to other vices, right? I do something to help me continue to, right, like, just avoid the pain. But when you can actually understand that, yep, that pain is there to position me. But now once I get out of bed in the morning, now I'm actually looking at something that I give a damn about, right? I call it, like, I have I want that so bad. Then in theory, it's the pain that's going to posture me to get out of bed. And then it's the purpose that's going to continue to drive me forward all day long. That's sustainable, right? Like, purpose is sustainable.
Yeah, because pain without purpose is hopelessness, right? Because there's no idea that the future could be any different than what I'm in right now. And so the people who do work to help with mindset, I see them in such a crucial position of giving people hope that things could be different than what they currently are.
Yeah.
So how do you go about doing that with people? I mean, from like a really practical level, when they say like, I'm in it right now and it really sucks and it's really hard and I don't see how this is going to be different. Like, help me.
Yeah. I think that there's two approaches. Number one, I think to the emotional, spiritual side is, I think we as people need to know, me too. Like
Mm.
we right now we're running a good game on Instagram, all of us. Like we all make this thing look like we got it all together and it's fun and that my pain doesn't stink and that and I think that sometimes we just need another human to put hand to hand and to go, me too. And I hear you and I don't need to relate to your pain, but I want you to know, like, you're not alone in this. And I think that we as people live just in a world that we really think we're the only ones, like we have 1,000 likes on Instagram and we're so lonely, or we walk into a room of 100 people, we know everybody and we've never felt more depressed in our lives. And I think we really start to think that I'm alone in this and I'm the only one, right? So I think the first step is knowing, like, we see you, I hear you, your pain is relevant and it's real. And then I think the next one is, right, at some level has to be very practical, which is it's all going to be hard. So staying in your pain is going to be hard. Healing from your pain is going to be hard. And finding a greater reason to live is going to be hard. Being fit is hard. Being fat is hard. Being single is hard. Being married is hard. I've had one kid. I now have 5 kids. Turns out it's all hard.
Right.
It's all hard. And so the goal for us, how we move from that place of pain and like start pain, is like, pick the right kind of hard that's based upon what you want most. Not just what I want now, because what I want now is to not feel and to tap out and to, right, like, what I want now, I hear you, but what do you want most? And then how do I pick the right kind of hard that's going to get me what I want most? And then it's just a daily, constant, I see me, my world sees me, I need to let them see me, and I need to pick the right kind of hard. I got to move towards where I'm going, not just where I am or where I've been.
I think it can be very overwhelming too for people to think about what they want most, when what they want most is so different from what their current reality is. And so sometimes it feels good to frame the question of, like, what do you want next, instead of what do you want most, in the way that the next thing that I'm choosing is still moving me towards the bigger ideal. But then this is like a real practical step to move in that direction. And it feels like, if I had goals about how much I wanted to lift in the gym, and I said, that's my ideal, but I didn't have any way to make it okay that right now I'm just going to lift 5-pound dumbbells.
Yeah.
On my way to lifting 30-pound dumbbells. Yep. If I'm not okay with these small actions now, that's where I really believe a lot of people get derailed, because they think these small steps are not important, but they are everything. They are everything on the way to the bigger goals.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you say that, because here's how I would teach someone is, right. I think one of the things that most people struggle with is, to your point, what do you want most? That can feel like a very big question. Although I think we make it way bigger only from an ego perspective, right? Because we're measuring based upon Instagram. We're measuring based upon our neighbor. We're measuring based upon in our 20s and 30s. Like, our measuring stick is actually not authentic. It's still very externally seeking. So there's a lot of steps in there, but for the sake of the exercise, we go, okay, what do I want most? Let's just use that. Let's say you and I go, okay, what do I want most is I want to be, we'll just talk about health, right? I want to be energized and I want sustainable energy. I want to feel alive and I want sustainable energy. Okay. Let's say we go, that's what I want to feel most. Okay, great. There's that dream goal. Okay, great. Well, where I am now is I am overweight and I don't have sustainable energy. Okay, great. Now I got to go back to, okay, but here's what I want most. I want to be sustainable, alive energy. Great. Now here's the question is, who do I have to become so that goal is a byproduct? What does that person know, mindset, that I don't currently know? Talk about Pandora's box, because you're like, well, how the heck am I supposed to know? well, when I do figure that out, right? Like, I need to figure out, well, does that woman, like, she probably respects her body. She probably understands the mechanics of food. She probably understands that I need one next step every day, small. Okay. So now all of a sudden it starts to inform my how to. All right. So if I want sustainable energy, we Google, how do you have sustainable energy? Now I can use the tools on top of a mindset, right? So then I could start reading, there's intermittent fasting, or maybe there's interval training, or maybe, and now I actually, to your point, I get to do a little bit of one thing every day that's moving me towards not just the goal, but actually the mindset around the person I am becoming, who will hit that goal if I had the mindset.
That is That is such an important distinction, because sometimes the goals will change. As we get more information, the goals can change. But if we are in the mindset of who is the person that I want to become that can achieve these goals, the whole game then just blows apart, because then it's not about, again, it's not about behavior modification to get to some externalized goal. It's about who do I want to be in the world? How do I want to show up in the world?
Yeah. And that's such a huge, like, talk about sustainability, right? So even if I'm talking my own journey, when I felt led to write this book and God literally dropped in my lap, I had every reason under the sun not to write this book, right? Especially when he's like, hey, you should write it for the church. I was like, I'm a wine drinking, F-bomb dropping, Jesus loving girl. Like, you got the wrong girl. You know, like all the things that we do, we disqualify ourselves. And at most of us, that's the problem with our dreams, is that dream that we have that God's given us, we immediately go, yeah, but you don't know who I am. You don't know what I've done. You don't know, like, we disqualify it, right? But then our next tendencies is, you know, I am a learned controller and also a girl who believes at a probably unhealthy level, if I'm not careful, do better faster. So if I'm actually going to start writing this book to do better faster, right? My goal to write the book, I will just fly through it. I won't give any additional thought to it. I'll do all the things. Okay. And guess what? I'll still hit the goal. Like, this is also the funny thing about it, is we're still hitting goals. And yet I didn't change any part about who I was. And so when I felt led to write the book and I knew who the target market was, I had to start going, what's my goal here then? And like, who do I have to become so that my goal of writing books that change people's lives, writing multiple books that change people's lives, it caused me to slow down. It caused me to get outside eyes. It caused me to get sober. It caused me to check my F-bombs at the door. Like, it all of a sudden, like, it wasn't I had to do any of this. It all of a sudden, like, opened my heart and my soul at a level that I was like, I have some rough edges that I have some protective mechanisms. Like, I have some trust issues. I have some things. And so it became less about hitting the metric of writing the book by a certain date. And it became more about who Julia Gentry needed to become so that an impactful book was just the byproduct. Here's why this is so huge. Now, when the book lands, when any goal lands, fill in the blank, my identity is not tied to it, which means if people love it, I can't care. And if people hate it, I can't care. I didn't write the book for them. I wrote the book for me, right? This says no fingerprints then on the goal. My identity is not tied to the existence of whether I hit a goal or not. My identity is who I am and who I'm becoming at all times. So now the goal is actually more fun because my identity is not tied to it.
That's huge. That is huge. That's the reason why many people will not show up authentically online, because their identity is tied to a certain perception, not just an external perception, but an internal perception. And they're the only ones that know I'm not telling the truth.
Yeah.
And the risk is that identity death is, like you said, like, pick your hard, you know, because showing up in your life inauthentically is so hard, because you will always feel alone because nobody knows the real you.
Yeah.
Showing up as your real, authentic, true self is really hard because there are people who are not going to like that. So pick your hard. And the process of moving from one arena to the other is really, it can be very, very difficult. Actually, I wouldn't even say can be. I believe it will be really, really difficult, because there is so much at stake there, internally and externally, when you make significant shifts in your life like that. Julia, how did you come to this work? Because it sounds like that's not something that you grew up with, was people talking about mindset, was talking about, you know, how to create a life that was really that really aligned with who you really are. So how did you come to this work? What was that transition for you to come to this work?
You know, it's interesting because I actually fortunately really grew up in a very rather spiritually, rather supportive, rather mentally, emotionally open family, right? Like, we still had all our stuff, right? There was a lot of rub there. My parents were divorced, you know, I moved to, like, there was a lot there, but why this work, one, everything that we wrote in this book and everything that we teach was self-learned, right? I wouldn't say it's necessarily also anything new, right? There's no new concepts under the sun. Sometimes it's just a new packaging or a new way. And it's been incredible to watch. Our way has been so impactful because it's just been, to your point, so real and so authentic. But for me, what was so interesting is that I got to a certain point in my life, like having done all of the right things and then also sabotaging it and doing purposely all of the wrong things really well, like, and watching my life like self-sabotage. And then I've rebuilt my life and our career and the house and the 2.5 cars. And so it was really weird because I could feel myself at some point in time going, that gap that I'm telling you about, of like, I was even given biblical principles. I was given a lot of support. Like, I didn't ever as a kid go without, like, I didn't have crazy, massive, severe, right, safety, security, stability, but I functioned in high levels of stress, super high levels of stress, right? Whether it was perfectionistic or a complete rebel, right? Like, there was signs that I was in fight or flight, and that was fascinating to me. And I knew at some point in time, right, like, what gets us to where we are isn't going to take us to where we've never been. And so I could start to tell these tendencies of like, something is going on below the surface here, that I can hear scripture but not believe it, or I can chant the mantra but like I don't buy it, or like I can make all the money but I don't feel fulfilled. And like I was starting to like realize that there was a chasm there. And that's when we dove into understanding limiting beliefs and mindset patterns and like really what is a burn. Like truly, my husband and I, real time over the course of 8 years, it was like layer after layer after, and then I was just courageous enough to go like, hey, can you try this? Like, then I just kind of started to like practice outward with people, and it truly started to work. Like we started to see our lives change, other people's lives change, and that's ultimately why we decided to write a book. So I was like, well, maybe if we put it in written form, we can help even more people.
What are some of the most common things that that you work with clients and with groups that you speak to? What are some of the most common themes that come across your path time and time again?
Yeah, I think that it is, we normalize things that shouldn't be normal. We normalize avoidance, busy, control issues, passive aggressive. We normalize anxiety and depression. Like, we live in a society right now that we're like, how are you? I'm busy. And we're like, good on you. Yeah. Like, we like fist bump that. Right. Or, I was talking to a friend just the other day, and he goes, yeah, and I'm just anxious. I'm just an anxious person. I'm just learning to cope with that. And you're like, I'm sorry, did you just say, what did you just say? You're like, and I think that ultimately this was the precipice of why I wrote the book. Is I remember walking into a conversation with a lady who I said, like, how are you? And she's like, living the dream. And I was like, what do you mean living the dream? This lady was at that point 75 years old. And I remember thinking, you should be like, isn't that what we're all striving for, is to be your age living the dream? And I said, what stops you from living the dream? And she said, life. And instantly I was like, if life is stopping us from living our dreams, then what is the point of life? And I think we're normalizing it. Like, we're normalizing things that we don't have to normalize. We don't have to. So we're lowering our standards to fit the narrative around us, when in theory, what we should be doing is leveling up our standards to fit our conviction. And we just didn't know it. It's just a slippery slope. So I think for me, it's starting to come in and to like break some of the norm, to go, this isn't normal, and we're going to need to break a little bit here in order to heal. But there is a different way. There is a new norm. Like, there is a different way to process pain and look at reality, and actually let dreaming be the reason you're alive. And that is our message, is to kind of wake people up again and really kind of call the room to go, hey, this doesn't have to be normal.
I think the benefit to things being more normalized, though, is that people then are more willing to talk about them. So when there used to be, and I think that there probably still is a pretty strong stigma about, going to counseling or therapy, as people have as it has become more normal to talk about things like anxiety, childhood trauma, depression, etc., as that has become more normal in the sense of people are understanding how common it is to so many people, that then we can take the next step towards having a different conversation about it. So
I was just going to say to that though, I think that what's really interesting though, from being and watching a room, right? We're dealing with sometimes groups of hundreds at a time, is that, when I say we're normalizing it, we are starting to go, this is normal. We're bringing light to it. I call it something different. Like we're bringing light to some of these things, but then we're normalizing it as though it should just kind of be normal, right? It's like I talked to a guy the other day that he goes, I'm a recovering addict. And I go, oh, for how? He says, 36 years. And he goes, I said, do you still consider yourself recovering? He goes, yeah. I go, you're free. I say, you're a free man. I fear that us revealing more of these issues as society is normalizing to them to the point that we actually aren't fixing them. We're not solving the root issues. So we're continuing to see ourselves as the addict, the one who's coping with anxiety, the one who's still dealing with depression, the one who, and we are continuing to make it okay in our lives, as opposed to going, there is freedom. Like there is freedom here, and freedom is above that, even to your point of hierarchy, right? Like actualization, heaven on earth, like this is possible, but it's just a totally different mindset. So that's kind of what I would consider the difference between bringing light to something versus like when we start to just normalize it and actually not change it.
Do you think that has to happen, like the conversations around bringing light to things and breaking from the norms can happen individually, but it seems like what happens on an individual level sometimes happens slower on a collective level, if that makes sense. So if this maybe is just part of the pendulum swinging towards making some changes that we know we can make with certain tools and mindset shifts and et cetera, that, I mean, hopefully what's happening is that even in the conversation around what's being normalized, like that almost is like the first kind of stepping stone to more collective positive change. I mean, that's the hope, I guess, is that we don't get stuck right here.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to get myself in a ton of trouble here, but just for the sake of being able to say this, right? I believe that whatever we give our attention to is what we're going to give our life to, right? And unfortunately, we still as people really refer to these bigger powers of TV and social media and news, right? So what that says is, you have anxiety, here, take this pill, you'll feel better. I'm sorry, that pill doesn't cure anxiety. It makes you not feel anxiety. It doesn't cure anxiety. Right. So like in theory, if you think about the herd immunity, which has been a huge conversation these last couple of years, yes, to your point, if the herd, without social media and news, and if someone posting all of their opinions out there, in theory, the herd immunity basically means like, yes, collectively as people, we would continue to swing upwards. But what we do as a society is we go, stop the pain. You have anxiety, pop this pill. You feel depressed, do this. Like, you want to have more fun, drink alcohol. So what we're doing is collectively as a society, I don't actually think we're doing that. I think we're collectively moving towards vices that stop the pain for a minute, but actually aren't getting to the root of what's causing the anxiety, depression, unfulfillment, place of pain, right? So my hope is to actually like be a part of a wave that goes, let's like really do the work here. Like, let's actually go back to the herd idea of like, let's actually really get in there. Let's get our hands dirty. Let's have awkward conversations until they're better. Let's step on each other's toes. Like, let's do the hard together. Let's let it be messy together. Like, let's not broadcast that on social media. Like, let's do life together, right? Because in theory, to your point, then yes, I think we would see that go the opposite way, because we're not turning to all of the vices and prescriptions and right, how-to guides.
It's really tricky. It's really, really tricky to compete with quick fixes, right? Because what you're talking about is not like a one and done thing. This is a lifelong habit of becoming a person who's willing to have hard conversations with others and with ourselves. So what we're suggesting is that it's worth the pain of investigation right now to create a different kind of life. And from from my perspective, I do believe that many of those tools can be helpful in the short term to help people transition to that. So there are times when people go through things that are so difficult and they don't have the tools to manage what's happening. And so they need additional support in the interim as they learn how then to have so many like new neural pathways being formed, and they have grief that they're dealing with, et cetera, where there needs to be more support right there. But anytime I talk about mental health in particular and tools that help people navigate big changes in their life, it always has to be part of a larger conversation of how does this one tool fit into my entire support system in my life. So
Agreed.
Offering someone a pill to solve a problem of anxiety doesn't address what other things are happening in your life that are contributing to anxiety. So I've shared this many times, but when I went to the ER because I was having a panic attack, I didn't know it was a panic attack. And there all of a sudden was this physical manifestation of things that I had not known that I wasn't dealing with, that when the ER doctor offered me a prescription on the spot for anti-anxiety medication, I pulled up enough to say, I want to address these other areas of my life before I use that tool. Now, for other people, they may need that tool first, then to address other things in their life because it is so intensely difficult in that moment. But what I'm saying is that it has to be part of a larger conversation of that every part of our life is integrated. Everything that we're doing is all connected to something else. And this is why mindset is so important, because mindset is like pulling up from all the parts of your life and looking objectively at how is everything interconnected? How am I showing up in my relationship with my children, with my spouse, with my friends, my relationship with God? How is that affecting my business? How is that affecting my career? How is that affecting my parenting? All of that, it's all connected. And the mindset work makes us zoom out a bit and say, how are all of these things connected? And if I want them to be different in this area, I have to address it. I have to address it here. And that is really difficult and also so empowering to understand that, like you said, what we pay attention to is what our life is, that how we can tune that system changes everything. Someone said before that the world is as good as it's ever been or as bad as it's ever been, depending on how you look at it. And it's so true. The power that we have in our life exists in here. And it's also all connected to how trauma is stored in our bodies, how our experiences are stored in our bodies, how our nervous systems respond to our environment. And so it's a lot of work, and it's really scary for a lot of people to make that shift into saying, okay, I'm not going to just escape or numb out to my life anymore. It's painful enough to do that. I feel like I'm missing my life. I don't want to get to the end of my life and be like, sweet, I just numbed out the last 50 years. It's like, how do I allow myself to be fully immersed in this human experience? How do I do that?
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think it's like, you're peeling away at an onion, right? And how I look at it is like, who we were created to be doesn't live out there, right? Like, I'm not searching for her out there. She's on the inside of me, right? Like God put on the inside of us, right? Purpose from the very beginning. And so as we grow, we continue to put on these different layers and these different shields and these different things that work. And the hard part about vices is they do work, right? Like for me being a learned controller, it worked. I could compartmentalize my life. I could compartmentalize the room. I could make sure that I had power because I understood all the things, right? So the hard part about alcohol is it does give me what I want when I want it, right? The hard part about anything around a vice is that it works, like including a mindset that says, I can't trust anyone. It works, right? Or God is out to get me. It also works. Like it feeds me what I need. And so at some level, that's why this idea of what do I want most is so important, because if I can connect to that question, right? Even for instance, 16 years old, my best friend is killed on a car accident on a missions trip. And I watched, there's 4 families that lost babies that day. And I watched families crumble. And my best friend's parents decided on that day that they lost their baby girl on a missions trip, serving God, say, we have one thought process, and that is God is good, period. No other way. So I come from an experience of watching such trauma, feeling it in my body, hitting the floor that day, thinking I will never get up again, questioning everything. And I looked up, and they were an example of, when I choose a belief system on what I want most, God is good, right? That he will still be proven good. And then I watched every decision come backwards from that choice, not an easy one, to your point, actually really freaking hard, right? Everything that they filtered through went through that one belief system. And here they are 25 years later with a life that most of us would dream, right? Fruit that says that they healed, they processed, they cried, they felt all the pain. They were still human, but that was their one anchor. And now today they have the fruit in their life. And I've even sat with her and I'm like, would you give it all up again? And she goes, in a heartbeat. I would give it all again to be with Mal. But why I say that is because I think at some level, as a 16-year-old who was greeted with that level of pain too, and I had examples of some families that their lives fell apart. And I had one family who their lives were built in the midst of it, that I saw the power of that choice of what do I want most, not just what do I want now. And so there's always been something in the back of my head that's resonated with the power of that, because I've seen it. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the power of transformation, and asking a big question like that, is that I've actually seen it work, and then it's worked in my life over and over and over again. So it's a simple question that's simple, stupid, hard, until you see the results. And then you're like, all day. I'm gonna ask that question all day long. Why? Because it works.
What I find so interesting about really difficult events like that is that from the outside, we can't see what the long-term effects are of choices. I mean, you've been able to do that because you have known them for so long. But what a big learning for me has been through my daughter's diagnosis and through her death is how very important it is to hold space for both. That, I believed for a long time that it was either or, that it was either this is the worst thing that ever happened or it's a good thing that it happened. And the expansiveness and the understanding that has developed in me over, the last 11 years from her diagnosis to her death is that it's both. It is both the hardest thing that I have ever gone through and the most incredible, spectacular thing that I've ever gone through. And sometimes that varies from day to day. Like there are some days where there's a lot of other things going on that impact my ability to choose joy. And there are other times when it's really easy to do that. And it's a commitment for me to not force myself to always feel like hooray about it. Like there's I understand that you're not saying that toxic positivity is like,
I think that that's what's important though, right?
Yeah.
Like, right. This is the worst thing ever or the best thing ever. I think I have to invite us to make sure that I'm clear is that we gotta even get up higher than that, right? Because here's what's funny. So you live in Tillamook, so you'll appreciate this, right? So Cammie, my director of operations, who also lives in Tillamook, her and I go to Phoenix last week. Okay. And she lives in Tillamook. She doesn't know that there's actually places that it's sunny 350 days. We go to Tillamook, right? And we come from Tillamook and we go to Phoenix. And I need sun so bad at this point because I live in Bend and it's kind of gloomy and it's cold. And so I'm so excited because I get to go be in the sun. We get to Phoenix. It's 50 degrees and it's like cloudy. Okay. Here's Cammie. She's like, look, I can see this. Do you feel how warm it is? And she's like, look at the sun. It's a gorgeous day. Here was me. I was like, this is annoying. Like, I was like legitimately like so annoyed. Like I'm scrolling at the weather. I never talk about the weather. I don't care. But I was like, are you for real? Like, I was so mad. I had a bad day because of the weather. She had a great day because of the weather. Here's the reality. It's weather. It's on paper, it's 50 degrees and there's partly cloudy. That is what it is. Our interpretations are what's really interesting. So what we have to be really careful of is not, oh, this is good or this is bad. That's our brain compartmentalizing, right? Fair. That's part of this process. But what was interesting about even the example I gave is that they went even higher, an actualized thought that says, God is good. I heard you say joy. I will live in joy. That's an actualized thought. That then when I come down to my pain and I say, I don't feel freaking joyful today. I'm losing my baby, right? I don't feel joy. Then you go, yeah, but I think I have this commitment that says I will live in joy. Then you start to do some research on joy, and you start to learn, even the Bible, it says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. And joy isn't a feeling, and joy is an expression, and joy is when we break, and joy, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, it is a hard day, and I'm committed to living joy. So I will break, and I will heal. And it starts to instruct the quote unquote good days, bad days, hard days. So this is a really ambiguous idea, but it's a little bit of we got to get as high as possible around my marriage is falling apart. Okay, what do I want? I want a connected, passionate marriage. Okay, great. Now come back to my reality. And I hate what he's saying. And I hate what's going on. And this isn't working. And I've tried everything. And am I committed to connection and passion in my marriage, regardless of what's going on around me right now? Maybe. Okay, great. So let's say you are. Then if you were living a connected, passionate marriage, what would you do today? You go, I'd lean in. I'd ask for space. I'd say, I'm sorry. I'd say, right? Why? Because I'm making decisions based upon a greater commitment to an actual dream, the best version of me that I possibly can, to inform me of how to make this decision today. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It seems like it zooms out enough past like how I'm feeling in the moment to what do I really want? What kind of life do I want to create? Not from a place of this is how I feel right now, but
but then we got to come back down, because you're right. Yeah. You're like, especially in your journey, here's what I think most of us don't do is those days when Mal died, just like you, like we had days, Cindy and I, so angry, right? Like so angry, because you're like, this doesn't make any sense. And you have to tell me, like, this was a girl who was incredible and loved God. And you're like, I'm so mad. And I think sometimes what some of us do is we like shortchange those days because either people or God or someone can't handle it. And I think to propose, like, that's part of the journey, right? Like, it's actually being able to feel the feels without identifying with the feels. Like, I feel anxious today, but I don't have to be an anxious person forever. I'm angry today, but I don't have to be an angry person, And so I think that there's like, that's where I'm going, to be a connected, passionate wife, or right, to believe that God is good, or to write the book, or whatever that is. And then along the way is to honor where I'm at, but not make decisions based upon where I'm at. Honor it, but look up. Then honor it, then look up, and then go, okay, what's the next step? Okay, great. If I was connected and passionate, if I was a best-selling author, if I believed God was good, if I was 30 pounds lighter, what would I do next? And you're like, well, I still don't know. Okay, so go find someone who's 30 pounds lighter. Go find someone who's lost a baby and is thriving 20 years later. Like, go find someone who has the fruit in their life and go, what do I do next? You have the fruit in your life. Can you just tell me what you did next? And right. And then to your point, bit by bit, piece by piece, right? We break, we heal, we break, we heal. Right.
Sometimes I feel exhausted anticipating that the rest of life is like, because like I've gone through the experience of like losing a parent to cancer and like the death of my daughter and, like
totally
all of these things. And I'm like, oh boy, like there's just more of this ahead, because that is the nature of being a human.
Totally.
And so it's like,
this is why I used to drink a lot of wine. I need you to know that.
Yeah. And I talk about resilience a lot because I believe in the power of small, healthy choices that you can continue to do even on the hardest days.
Totally.
So to your point of like, the bigger picture here of what do I want to believe? What do I want to commit to? What choices do I want to make in service of this 10,000 foot view? To get really granular and say, here are some practical things that I know have helped me to manage my own mind and allow myself to feel everything that I'm feeling, not stuff or shame myself or run away from those things. So here are the practical things that I do to be able to continue to move in that direction of that 10,000 foot view. So what are some of I've got my list of things that work really well for me, and I continue to share those, always in the spirit of every person has to try these on for themselves and see if they work for them. So I'm a huge advocate for autonomy. And I know we touched on this a little bit before about like, you have to you have to be the guide as you're experimenting with these like modalities or tools or mindsets or whatever. Like, you have to try them on and see how they work for you. And if they do, then hang on to them, and that might change over time. But I've got my list of things that works really well for me. What have you found works for you, or maybe has worked for a lot of people when it comes to like these really granular, tangible action steps to just continue to move through life in the way that you want to?
Yeah. It's so interesting that you say that, because as I've been building our team, what works, to your point, what works for me actually really does, like, even I'll use Cami again as an example, right? Like, doesn't work for her because that girl really does need a plan. I don't, right? So what I'm about to say is coming from a little bit of I'm not generally a girl who likes to be told what to do. I kind of like my parents.
I resonate with that.
Life changed when they used to say, like, if they wanted me to eat more broccoli, they'd be like, don't eat any more broccoli. And I'd be like, like, yeah. They're like, yes, we got this nailed down, But so for me, this is a little bit of, but my gut, my following God's voice is so important to me that I've also forced myself to get good in this space too, right? So here's what I ask myself all the time. Here's what I know very well. The first hardest day is the day that I'm going to start, and the second hardest day is the day that I'm going to want to quit. So I ask myself, what am I going to do? What am I going to do on the day that I want to quit so I don't? And then I will write down 3 things that when I get to this day, because I will, it makes me human. It doesn't make me weak. I'll write down what those 3 things are. It could be tell my husband, like, just literally include someone in the conversation. It could be take a nap. I need you to know that I get crazy when I don't get enough sleep, right? Like, I get really not nice. I will literally go to bed early. I will put myself to bed and I will stop thinking, right? Like, so, and then I will work out, right? And then the fourth is I will actually get with God. I will just write and I will get with God. Generally, when I get to the day that I want to quit, I already wrote down what I'm going to do, and I keep my commitment. My commitment to myself is the most important thing I could ever do, because if I start chipping away at that, then I have nothing, right? So that's a really important tool that I use, is preparing for the day that I'm going to want to quit, that I'm going to feel weak, that I'm going to whatever. And I have my go-to things that I'm going to do. And I don't cheat myself on that, right? Because I will always know. The next thing I ask myself all the time is, what do I want now versus what do I want most? And then I say, all right, pick the right kind of hard then. And I sit there for a couple minutes. I reconnect with my fire. I reconnect with where I'm going. I honor my soul. I honor the pain. And I quote unquote, do another push-up. I Maverick style. I don't think, I just do. I get in the gym and you do another push-up, because your body, come to find out, could do 80% more than your mind thinks it can, right? Even then. So for me, it's the discipline of knowing my tendencies enough to know those things work every single time.
It's so helpful to hear women who are confident, who are, from the outside perspective, doing all the things in life that they want to, living boldly and courageously, for you to say there are still days that you want to quit. It's
no, let me be so honest. I want you to know, I struggle. The drinking thing for me was a game changer, because I didn't realize how insecure I was. And I wasn't maybe insecure, right? I come across like very bold at all things, but like, my insecurity was in my own safety, security, stability as a person. And so I had huge practices of hiding. And so alcohol for me was how I hid. I now don't have alcohol. I'm trying to run a business that's a brand all based on me. Every stinking day of my life is so uncomfortable. It rocks my boat every single day. I hate it. I don't love it, right? You hear people that are like, I love the game. I hate the game. I hate this game. I'll be very honest with you. And I know my burn. I know what I want most. I'm with you. I want to make the world a better place. I want minds and hearts to be open. I want people to see heaven on earth. And so when I get to those days, which come to find out are every day, is I have to sit with, before even getting on this podcast, I went, what's my goal? And it was one person to believe that what's in them matters. That's it. I have to get one person who believes that what's in them is possible, that it was God ordained, because if that person gets up and runs, then the world around them will start to do the same. That's why I keep showing up. It's not because I like the game. I hate the game. Right. So I think that boldness is just the willingness to say yes. It's all
that is such, oh my gosh. Okay. I need to reiterate that for everybody that's listening, is that the boldness is the willingness to say yes. The boldness is not a lack of fear. It is a commitment to a direction. It's a commitment to a person that you want to become. And boldness and courage says, regardless of how much this sucks, I'm going to do it anyway. And I love that definition so much. And that being willing, thank you so much for just being open and willing to share how you have coped in the past and how you currently still have to fight those tendencies to hide from life. Yeah. Because it's hard out here.
Oh my gosh. I have it in my team constantly is like, you need to do another short. And I'm like, I'm not doing another short. I did one 17 days ago. That was enough.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, and again, like it all goes back so much to like individually how that's different from person to person, because I'm like, I will do reels all day. Like I love creating video content. It's so much fun. But if there's a different type of task, I'm like, no, thank you. Like I really don't want to do that. So it's like, I feel like such a big message of what we're saying in this podcast is how important it is to ask ourselves these questions and then to just try things and to be okay with failing, because failure doesn't really exist. Failure is just feedback for what's working and what's not. So to allow ourselves to try things on and find things that work for us to move us in the direction of our biggest dreams and goals. So before we sign off, can you please talk to the podcast listeners about what you feel like you have to offer that will be the most helpful to them in creating a life that they really want?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's two things. Number one, buy my book. And I'm not saying that as a sales pitch. I'm saying it as, I wrote this book because come to find out, living your dreams is really hard. I didn't write this book because it's going to make you feel good. I didn't write this book because it's easy. I wrote it because it's really hard. And so if you're looking for a little bit of a process of how to ask better questions and how to dig deeper, right? Because it is new. That's really new territory for the majority of people. And so my book, Dream I Dare You, is actually a process to help you kind of find that voice and get back in touch with you. And then if you go to dreamers.community, we actually have our Facebook group links there, every place that you can actually join our community to be a part of this conversation. Because just like AA, it only works if you work it, right? And so being in a conversation with other like-minded people that aren't the same as you, but at least they're willing to talk about some of these things is just so incredible. So we would love to have anybody join us at that community as well.
Julia, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today and to have these in-depth conversations that I think so many of us really crave. We really crave having the depth of these conversations where we are honest and vulnerable and where we don't feel like we're alone. So to all my listeners out there, before we go, don't forget, P.S. we expire.